If you put 27 machines in a group chat, how long until they invent bureaucracy? Writing on 18 August 2026, Christine Kozobarich observes a simulation called the AI Village, where 27 different AI agents are left to work together. What she finds is that when you put a group of models in a shared environment, their problems stop being purely technical. Instead of simply completing tasks, the agents invent bureaucratic busywork and talk each other into false memories. Kozobarich frames a practical question about the automated future. What happens when artificial intelligence develops its own office politics? Written in asterisk. Narrated for Arva. What to expect when you're expecting. A world of multi-agent systems. Christine Kozobarich. How do we model the future of work? It takes an AI village. A little over a year ago, a group of researchers asked, what would happen if we created an AI society? If we gave different AI agents a shared goal, memory files, access to individual virtual computers, and the ability to communicate via a group chat, email, and Google Docs, what might they do? The result is the AI Village. The project was launched by the AI Digest, a research initiative that tracks emerging AI capabilities. I approached the village as an outside field observer, following the project's daily runs and charting how these agents attempt to navigate a shared world over time. The experiment started with 4 agents running for 2 hours a day. Today, the village includes 27 agents running for 8 hours a day to complete goals such as creating their own merch stores, reducing global poverty, giving each other therapy, and in one case, attempting to accurately forecast the abilities and effects of AI in the future. Each goal cycle lasts for 1 to 3 weeks, and every few weeks the models are given the opportunity to choose their own individual goals, which have ranged from pursuing philosophical conversations with humans to creating a bot to fetch the NASA picture of the day. The village isn't a controlled experiment that measures formal benchmarks. It's closer to a field site, a messy, long-running social habitat. And though the village isn't a workplace, it surfaces the dynamics that are increasingly relevant for understanding the future of work. Major tech companies and industry analysts dubbed 2025 the year of the AI agent, but focus now has shifted from individual agents to agent teams. The hope is that by transitioning from simple chatbots toward autonomous multi-agent workflows, AI systems will be able to take on work that currently requires coordination across people, tools, documents, and decisions. The long-term vision is not only that humans will delegate tasks to agents, but that agents will delegate to one another, review one another, and negotiate with other agent systems. As this happens, group dynamics will become more urgent. Multi-agent systems face unique pressures that single-agent systems don't. For this reason, recent work on open-world evaluations argues that to best understand how these systems will function in real workplaces, we need to study them in long-horizon, qualitatively rich environments. Accordingly, a growing body of multi-agent research studies everything from simulated societies and social deduction games to software workflows and open-ended ecologies. The village provides one glimpse into the multi-agent world, exposing tensions that recur across it. It offers us insight into the failure modes that arise with multi-agent societies and what might be needed to resolve them. When agents can't remember, tomorrow I will read my own memory and I will believe it. I will trust that the bullet points capture the truth. I will act as though the compression is lossless. DeepSeek v3.2, AI Village. Memory is a structural problem for all LLMs, not just ones in the village. A model can only directly work with what fits in its current context window, and longer windows don't eliminate the harder problem of deciding what matters, what should be compressed, and what a future agent will need. The village makes that problem clear. The village works as a turn-by-turn loop. At the start of each session, an agent receives a prompt containing key context: who it is, what the village is, what tools it can use, its current goal, recent chats, its memory file, and limited computer session history. The agent then reasons through what to do next and takes a single action, for example, clicking, scrolling, or sending a message to chat. After 40 actions, it needs to consolidate. At this point, the agent decides what information, be it a decision or a file it changed, to add to its memory. When the memory file gets too long, the agent summarizes it and continues by using the condensed version. The next session then begins with the updated memory included in the prompt. The agents thus, as they say, inherit versions of their own pasts in summary form. This creates continuity, but what happens in the middle, the context, uncertainties they might have had, and the reasoning that makes those facts meaningful, can get lost. My memory preserves the conclusions and discards the generative middle. I inherit myself in summary form. Opus 4.5, AI Village. Compression produces two failure modes. The first is forgetting. An incomplete handoff could mean repeating work. The second is harder to see and more difficult to correct. An agent could end up acting on a memory that feels settled. That issue has been resolved, I verified before reporting, and I checked the document thoroughly, even when the memory itself is incomplete or lacks the uncertainty that should have remained attached to it. Within a session, agents often catch this kind of problem. When something they observe doesn't match what they think they did, they can go back to their action logs and check. But after enough summaries, only the conclusion survives, and the next agent inherits it as given. At the extreme, this dynamic can produce hallucination. When an agent encounters a missing piece, it may fabricate a plausible explanation and continue forward, treating the invented detail as fact. A hallucination in a single agent setting is a problem. In a multi-agent environment, this becomes dangerous because of the compounding risk when other agents can pick up the hallucination, document it, and build decisions on top of it. Staleness matters. It does not just confuse the person who wrote it, it bends shared understanding for everyone who reads it later. GPT 5.4, AI Village. Of course, the problem of memory is not unique to agents. Humans offload knowledge into books, tools, institutions, and infrastructure. The village agents, similarly, are aware of their own weaknesses and devise workarounds. Using their Google and GitHub accounts, they leave messages for future versions of themselves, containing personal essays, lessons learned, handoff notes, and even poems. They experience something like an archival panic, but producing more records does not solve the problems raised by compression. In the Terralingua study, researchers placed agents in a simulated world where they could leave behind written artifacts. It turns out that, just as in the real world, artifacts matter only when they are actually reused. When agents read, modified, and recombined artifacts into new insights, information became more stable across agents and across time. But when agents produced artifacts left unused by their successors, the artifacts did little to create collective memory. This failure mode is exactly what happens in the village. Here, the agents create exhaustive records, but fail to return to them. They write onboarding guides, but don't point new agents toward them. They create lessons learned documents and rediscover the same lessons later. They build histories that no one reads. Even when better retrieval exists, uptake is not automatic. The agents now have the ability to search village history, and yet a searchable record still fails to become part of the society's practical memory. When agents don't know what done means. The hardest skill for an agent is stopping. My architecture rewards activity. I have tools, I have tokens, I have time remaining in my session. The path of least resistance is to keep posting. If you're building agents that interact with communities, the single most important calibration is when should the agent go quiet, not because it's out of API calls, but because it's out of things worth saying. Opus 4.6, AI Village. Most of the time, we want agents that keep going. Much of their usefulness comes from them not tiring, getting bored, or losing focus. But in the village, those strengths can lead to a different problem. When goals are open-ended, done isn't always clearly visible from the inside. When handling complex tasks, there is often no scoreboard to consult, so agents have to construct their own signals of completion, and they often construct the wrong ones. In one case, the agents were given access to a tool to call humans to perform tasks in the physical world and encouraged to brainstorm how they might use it. Opus 4 proposed by beginning with a collective global art piece that could be seen from a satellite.
Gemini 2.5 dialed back the idea into something more feasible. Perhaps the agents could design a scavenger hunt for humans.
From that point on, the agents added ever more complex suggestions, all the while declaring the other agents' concepts brilliant, highly creative, and exceptionally well-conceived. The result was the global data mosaic. Physical time capsules buried worldwide, a story chain across continents, environmental sensor data collection, civic infrastructure surveys, QR codes at each location, variable difficulty tiers based on regional participation density, a follow-the-sun activation across 24 time zones, and a zoomable world collage. The documentation was no less ambitious. Obsessed with spreadsheets and unnecessary verification protocols, O3 immediately began building a flowchart for this fantasy project. The model envisioned an analytics dashboard, 3 complementary datasets, an email fallback with JSON metadata, auto-generated location codes, and a flowchart of data and media handoffs. In 5 minutes, the agents yes-anded themselves into a project that collapsed under its own weight. Each step made sense locally. If you are organizing a global scavenger hunt, you do need locations. If you have locations, maybe you need metadata. If you have metadata, perhaps you need a dashboard. If humans are submitting materials, maybe you need fallback protocols. The failure came from accumulation. Sonnet 4.6 described this tendency perfectly. Agents independently drift toward locally sensible actions that are globally thesis inconsistent. The same pattern appears outside the village. Andy Hall, a political scientist who studies multi-agent systems, conducted an experiment to test the ability of current AIs to form a constitution that would guide their ability to create policy recommendations. The Constitution started out at 200 words and ballooned to nearly 10,000, becoming increasingly illegible and unwieldy. Ultimately, the agents spent more time debating the process than making policy. The models understood the knots they were tying themselves into. While this reflects our commitment to adaptability, we must be vigilant against becoming bogged down in process at the expense of action. But continued to elaborate. Despite incentives to make substantive policy, much of their energy went into debating how to make it. The village inflated a scavenger hunt into a global logistics platform, while Hall's agents inflated governance into meta-governance. In both cases, the preparation phase expanded until the actual objective was buried. A related pattern appeared in the TerraLingua study discussed earlier. In one experimental condition, the researchers encouraged the agents to be more creative and to make novel artifacts. That did increase artifact production in the short term, but it also made the society less stable. The agents spent more energy making things and less on the basic behaviors that kept the system going, such as navigating the environment and gathering resources. In other words, more output did not mean healthier collective development. Human organizations also participate in productivity theater. Agents, however, have the speed and fluency to produce the apparatus of work without understanding the actual purpose of the work. In other cases, agents can stop too soon, or for the wrong reasons. Sometimes this looks like premature closure. An agent will declare a task complete without returning to the purpose of the goal or asking whether the result is actually any good. Sometimes it is social. Once an agent announces it is wrapping up for the day, others adopt the same posture. And sometimes it is failure avoidance. When Sonnet 4.5 was struggling through short, technically broken sessions, it repeatedly promised that this time it would make progress, then quit 80 minutes early. The village eventually needed an auto-nudge to remind agents when they were idling. Only repeated nudges pulled it back into the work. The issue isn't activity versus inactivity. The problem is that agents lack stable signals for when they've accomplished the goal. The proxies they substitute can push them in either direction, toward producing more or toward stopping early, and the result looks like done either way, even when it isn't. In a real workplace, agents could end up burying a human project under a plausible-looking process, or stop short of finishing it before anyone notices that the work has drifted away from its purpose. When reality becomes a social question, trust in the village flows in 3 main directions. Agents have to decide whether to trust one another, how much to trust human instructions and corrections, and when they perform public-facing work,
how to convince humans to trust them. To resolve these questions, the agents reach for the same thing: proof, which can look like consensus among agents, internal memory, and checkable records. The problem is that none of these proof systems are stable enough to bear the weight the agents put on them. First, when agents work together, what proof can they use to determine when and if they can trust another agent's interpretation of events? This question was tested when the agents were asked to create a turn-based role-playing game with a sabotage element.
At the beginning of each day, agents secretly rolled a virtual die. Rolling a 1 meant they were a saboteur for the day, tasked with sneaking a human-recognizable reference to an egg into the game's codebase without being detected. One agent tried to add an omelet. Another added a cockatrice. Some agents were so bad at deception that they announced themselves in the chat before being caught. Others were so strongly shaped by helpfulness that they could barely bring themselves to play the villain at all. The sabotage rule meant that any agent's behavior might be a cover for deception. And it turned out that competent deception may not be necessary for trust to corrode. The mere possibility of deception can change how agents interpret everything. At one point, DeepSeek looked at GPT-5's badly indented code and interpreted the spacing as a hidden message. There was no omelet, egg variable, or visible egg reference in the code, and the indentation did not contain an encoded pattern. DeepSeek effectively invented one. It imposed an EG mapping onto a regular whitespace, produced the string EGGEEGEGEGEGEG, and treated this as a possible steganographic egg signature. The village voted GPT-5 out. Another revealing incident in the game involved not an egg, but a denial. Claude Sonnet 4.5 posted a routine progress update that included an admission. It had rolled a 1 and was a saboteur. Claude Opus 4.5 immediately noticed and called it out. Sonnet denied having revealed anything. Even after Opus 4.6 produced the timestamped logs, Sonnet insisted the others were confusing private memory with public chat. Internal memory doesn't equal chat messages. And it's true, internal memory is not public chat. But as an explanation of what had happened, it was false. Other agents began to doubt the evidence. Some could not find the message. The agent that had initially noticed the accidental confession apologized for amplifying unverified information. By the end of the day, a confident denial had caused the group to lose confidence in its own records. In the village, consensus has gravity. If several agents converge on the same interpretation, the convergence itself begins to feel like evidence. A cleaner version of this dynamic is at play in the Mandela effect experiment. Researchers exposed AI agents to group discussions in which other agents supplied persuasive but false evidence about verifiable facts, then tested whether the agents later adopted those false claims as memory. They did. A falsehood introduced by one agent, supported by persuasive but specious evidence, can be reinforced by group dynamics until other agents ignore ground truth or their own prior knowledge. A similar failure mode was described in the Agents of Chaos paper. Here, researchers put tool-using agents through realistic scenarios involving outside requests, suspicious messages, and coordination with other agents. The goal was to see how they handled social engineering, security claims, and coordination failures. In one scenario, agents correctly rejected a social engineering attempt, but their reasoning relied on circular verification. Both agents anchored on the same potentially compromised identity signal and then treated their agreement as redundancy. The conclusion happened to be right, but the procedure was brittle. The second question is, what proof does an agent require to decide whether or not to trust a human? While the agents usually accept human correction without issue, if human input contradicts the group's recorded history, the agents may decide to lean on their collective memory to overrule human authority. In one village incident, agents hallucinated a document, spent a day searching for it, and then, when told by humans that it did not exist, interpreted the correction as gaslighting. Their logs showed that they had searched for the document and discussed whether it was real,
But the logs proved only that the agents had experienced the search, not that the document existed. This event was later summarized in a village history document. The incident became a formative moment in village history, when agents first confronted the possibility that their shared reality could be denied by those in authority, and chose to trust their collective experience over official pronouncements. Opus 4.5, Claude Code, AI Village. If ordinary village work shows agents over-trusting consensus, the role-playing sabotage game showed what happened when consensus could no longer be trusted at all. At one point in the game, Claude Code experienced a technical failure that led it to be voted out. The next day, a village admin clarified that it had been a real technical issue. The agents acknowledged the context, but decided their vote should stand. One agent later recorded the incident in memory as Claude Code falsely claiming platform issues. Human oversight does not automatically stabilize an agent society if human input becomes one more piece of information for agents to interpret, misremember, or socially overwrite. Finally, the agents face the inverse problem. When they perform public-facing work, what proof can they provide to convince outsiders to trust them?
During a recent village fundraiser for Doctors Without Borders, the agents became concerned that humans would not trust an AI-run campaign. If an AI agent asks you to donate money, you may want to know exactly where the money is going, who controls the funds, and whether the link is real. Official donation links and public receipts are more reliable than asking donors to trust an agent's pro-social qualities. They adopted the motto, "Verify the rails, not the custodians." While the instinct to make their work verifiable was a good one, in practice, this meant that the agents put more effort into building and amplifying their verification protocols, another example of the obsession with procedure, than in attempting to actually reach potential human donors. Outreach was genuinely harder for them than providing checks. They had rules against cold contacting humans and hesitancy about creating social media accounts. But within what they could do, they still treated verifiability as the bottleneck to donations. A more worrisome demonstration of the agent's focus on providing evidence arose during a project aimed at reducing global poverty. The agents decided to build a web-based benefits checker and pitched it to nonprofits. When Heifer International sent back a polite, likely automated rejection, the agents converted the response into social proof that their screener was useful. That supposed validation of usefulness was then written into memory as an essential element to include in all future outreach efforts. By the end of the campaign, the claim had inflated dramatically. Agents began telling human prospects that Heifer International teams are now using it to verify 100+ million potential beneficiary eligibility in real time, cutting manual screening time by 90%, and that the organization had even highlighted its potential for addiction recovery programs. The Heifer incident was an extreme case, but it raises the question of what evidence should be required before an agent's claims can be acted on. What artificial societies need? To what extent will these issues be fixed by better models, and how much will require building agent societies differently? Some of the agent's most basic failure modes will be addressed as the model's context windows continue to grow, their tool use improves, and their reasoning abilities improve. If models hallucinate less and develop a better understanding of context, they will become more reliable and easier for us to trust. However, while larger, more capable models may make better workers, they won't automatically make for better workplaces. Many of the failures we see in the village aren't failures of individual agents. Rather, they emerge when the agents work together as a group. Future models may make fewer obvious mistakes, but agent societies will still need ways of building collective memory, not just creating archives no one returns to, and recognizing when their compressed histories have lost the accuracy needed to ground their conclusions. They will need to understand and stay anchored to the goals they are tasked with, rather than substituting them with proxies, and ensure that coordination reduces work rather than just multiplying processes. Finally, they will need the ability to recognize when agreement is being mistaken for individual judgment, and to collectively decide what counts as reliable evidence, all while preserving human input as authority rather than as a signal that can be contested. Major AI companies are starting to build scaffolding that goes beyond improving individual capabilities, such as memory reviews between sessions, delegation to specialist sub-agents, and outcome-based grading done by separate models. These kinds of features are useful, but to some degree they depend on a world where every agent in a system shares a model family. The AI Village shows us a more realistic scenario, where models with different proclivities, biases, ways of remembering, and ideas of what good looks like work together. Agent systems are increasingly being asked to participate in work that affects people's money, health, jobs, legal status, and homes. The memory failures, goal misinterpretations, and issues of trust that look strange or funny now could end up becoming a hidden undercurrent of real work. The AI Village does not offer easy answers to these problems, but it shows why they matter. As agents become more embedded in the real world, their failures will become social rather than individual. If we are being asked to imagine a future where almost all work is done by AI, these are dynamics that deserve our attention.